Spring, Conroe? Waller? Okay. Very good. Thank you all for coming out. We will start, like usual, with prayer and pledges led by Michael Tapp, who is our Texas Truth Movement member, and he's also a veteran.
Stand with me, please. As we give grace and praise to our Lord. All right? Lord God Almighty, you are our light and our salvation. Whom shall we fear? You defend us. Whom shall we dread? Though I am set upon by evildoers, adversaries, enemies, my heart will not fear. I shall remain confident in you. One thing I ask, Father, that you allow us to dwell in your house all the days of our lives. Thank you, Father, for sending Ms. Linahan to us here to speak. I pray, Father, that you would bring people that will assist her and help her in her important work in protecting our children and the education system in the state of Texas. Pray, Father, these things in the name of Jesus Christ, my Savior, your Son. Amen. Amen. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Please be seated.
Thank you, Michael. And I think our membership is still out in the hall. So we do have a quorum to have our meeting tonight, so thanks to all the members for coming out. I did want to make a special recognition to one of our newest board members. So George, can you stand up for a second so everybody knows who our hospitality chair is? And yeah, and he will be taking lots of pictures. So if you see a friendly guy welcoming you to the meeting, you know that's George, our hospitality chair. Do we have any elected officials in our group? I think we do. We have Denise Morrison with Klein ISD. She's a trustee. Thank you, Denise. Do we have any precinct chairs or precinct leads? Yes, thank you. All right. Any other? I know we have a candidate running for Congress in Dana Crenshaw is current incumbent, so we will be hearing from Nick Tran later this evening. So those of you who are in that area can share this information with your friends and family. Okay, Gary is outside. Just see if we can do a quick treasure report. So while we're waiting for Gary to come in, we did send out the minutes pretty quickly last month, so hopefully you'll remember them. But, or actually it was in February when we sent them out. So are there any revisions or changes needed to the minutes? If none, they are adopted as is. So Gary's our treasurer, and he's going to come give us our current balance.
Okay, short and sweet. Thank you, everybody, for all of your donations every meeting. But today, as of this moment, we have $4,474.19.
Whoa.
Thank you, Gary, for all of your fine work that you do. Okay. So I'm going to just use a couple minutes to share a few thoughts that I have about the topic we're kind of talking about tonight is education. We have a very special presenter. I've been hoping to get to have Alice Linahan here for actually many years. I've had the privilege of knowing her for about a decade. And if you remember, before we had Zoom or any of those online meeting type things, we used to call a phone number and listen, and there would be like this phone conference going on, and you just kind of listened in. And I started doing that back about in 2015, and Alice was who I was listening to. And I had met Alice out in Magnolia at a school, and she had done a presentation, and the types of things she was talking about just really piqued my interest tremendously. And I was amazed at how Alice would teach her audience, which was mostly parents, about education. And she would have on these phone conferences these various guests from across the country. And I remember one phone conference, she was explaining how she was giving these moms advice of how they would go to Austin, where they would meet, and how they were going to go talk to various legislators. And I thought, wow, that's a lot, to drive up there and do all that. And anyway, I was always intrigued with how smart Alice was on the topic of education. She was discussing things that I had never heard in my circle discussing. Let me tell you who my circle was. I was a seasoned educator who had worked, back at that time, I had taught and worked for about 29 years in public education on various grade levels. Organizations like Houston ISD, Region 4, Education Service Center. I had worked at Lone Star College. I had worked for Tomball ISD, Galveston ISD, and Cypress ISD. So I was what you would call experienced. And the other strange thing, Alice, I was the trainer of trainers. So I was the person they would send all over the United States to learn information. And I was also going to all these different conferences because my job was staff development, training teachers, training principals, superintendents. We put together all the different kinds of workshops, retreats, trainings for all these people. And smaller districts, when I worked in Houston ISD, we would adopt all the smaller districts. So people who think they're in these real hooty districts like Klein, they all came to us because we were the largest district, and we would provide free staff development to their people so they could learn all the same information. And we would hire, Houston ISD was the biggest one in the whole state, so we would hire exclusive trainers to come, and we would let them come in and hear the various trainings also. So why I'm telling you all this is that all these different things that I had been trained, I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, my major was curriculum and instruction, and so I went to graduate school at University of Houston. Again, I was studying education administration. So I was like entrenched in all these education topics. And here was this mom that was telling us all sorts of things that I was like, how does she know all this? And what was very interesting at that time in 2018, a friend of mine who I had known for many years, we had met right after college when you're in your 20s and you're doing all those fun things and going places. And he became one of our state senators. And so when I retired from working, he asked me to come help him for about 6 months because he had a special project he wanted me to do. And I kept telling him, well, there's probably plenty of other people that know a lot more than me, because no, Marianne, you've done it all. You can come help me. So my job was to watch videos of hearings, of education hearings in Texas. And so as I sat there listening, at the very end of the hearings would come these moms, Alice Linahan, Lynn Davenport, Meg Baggage, and I was like, oh, those are the ladies that were on those phone conferences. Here they are again. And they would come time after time, and they put you at the very end, so it's a long meeting, and here they are giving this great testimonies. And so I remember one day I was sitting in Paul Betancourt's office, and I said, I'm going to call Alice Linahan. I'm going to ask her questions right here, like what's going on? And Alice gave you a lot of information, a long speech about the red and the green people and stuff. And so anyway, time has flown, but needless to say, just recently, we've been hanging out with Alice Linahan in Austin. This was the first time that I ever drove up and decided to participate with Susan. We had our wagon full of water, which was liquid courage. And we would go door to door. We had about 21 plus representatives. We went in to talk to them about the topic of education. And just kind of let them know our feelings and thoughts, and to try to find out what their feelings and thoughts were. Mostly, we were talking to people 25 and under years old. But some of them were much more gracious than others. Some of them were like, didn't really want to waste their time with us. But it's a very educational event. You don't realize how important it is for us to be involved and engaged. And one of the, I guess, sayings that I've picked up over the years now is the government is run by who's involved. And so if we don't like what these people are doing, we have to get in their face and talk to them. And sometimes we just sat there on their sofas because we were tired and kept talking to them. But anyway, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about that part of my interactions and what I've learned from Alice, because you can tell education is important, but it's not only the topic of education. I don't know when I realized it wasn't when I was in my 20s, it wasn't when I was in my 30s, it wasn't when I was in my 40s, but I remember when I had left teaching, I realized how important my job was, how the children took everything I said to heart. And I worked with young children. When I worked at the college, I was working with people my age, some of them were, but a variety of ages. And as their instructor, you are molding their thoughts on what they believe. And that's what happened to me. I was in the colleges and universities being very well indoctrinated into what they wanted us to know. And we never critically asked questions, or I didn't, and I trusted the people I was working with and that they had our best interests at heart. But one of the things I think, Alice, you've helped me to do and grow in is to critically analyze. And I think 2020 helped us too, to say, what is going on out there? But I know that Dr. Pat Huff and Monica and Susan Scruggs is in the room, and Erin. There's many of us, if I've left someone out, who've gone to Austin to try to make a difference. And I appreciate all of that, the help and involvement. And I just would like to encourage you that if you can't get up to Austin, to try to at least go to your local school board. Ours is televised, and I think Tomball, y'all are televised now, and Klein, you're televised. So all of us can actually fold clothes, do laundry, and see what is actually happening in our schools. And believe it or not, our one little voice can, I think, truly make some differences. And at least people know that we're not just rolling over, taking everything they're doing. So I think Gina Buckley has a special announcement she wanted to share. So she's going to come on up. And Gina is our fundraising and special events chair.
Can you guys hear me okay? So on the tables, on the tables, one side has Alice on it, and the other side talks about family bingo night fun. So we're trying to do something that'll be a family-friendly event. And we're gonna plan it for July or August. Does anyone think that's a good idea? You think you could have some fun with that and have some people out and bring some families? All right. So just so you guys understand, the reason we do fundraising in addition to membership for this group is so that we can attract great speakers like tonight, to be able to pay for their fees, travel expenses. Maybe they have an honorarium that they request for, what they do outside of when they come to the meeting and some of the things they'll bring, the topics that they'll bring. But we also support conservative candidates in the area. We also want to support other conservative groups if we have the ability to do so. So that's some of the reasons why we're going to do more fundraising to try and build up. I mean, we're in a good place right now, as Gary shared. better than when we started. We were at 0. We started from scratch. So we're excited about having some fun events, some other events. We had a good silent auction during our Christmas party, if anyone was able to be there. That helped put some money in our coffers so that we could attract some speakers to our events. So if anybody's interested in working on a committee with me for the bingo event, the one thing I did notice on the sheet that everyone got with the agenda on it is my email is wrong. It's my email, Gina Buckley near the bottom, is gbmom25@gmail.com, and the MOM is not there, it's OM, it says gbom. So MOM25@gmail.com. If you want to email me that you're interested, I will get back to you as well, okay? Or you can come up to me after the meeting and we can talk about it then too. Thank you, and I want to leave time for our great speaker.
Okay, I also want to introduce our education chair is Dr. Pat Huff, and he is going to say a few words.
Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Really, it's nice to see a full house. We are in for a treat tonight. I can just tell you that. I'm not going to speak to Alice's credentials. I'm going to speak to her character. Her character is what rises above all of the credentials that she shares in terms of her knowledge. And I hope you don't mind if I share a story. I need to get this approved with you. I've known, kind of like Mary Ann, I've known Alice since 2015 when I got into this activism. And Alice was one of the first people that I met at the State Board of Education meeting. And Morath had just come on board, and he was telling everybody what he wanted to do. And we really didn't know him at the time. But my point here on Alice's character is that it's above reproach. Alice was someone who was flying high in the Republican Party. I mean, at the top. She was trotted out by all the top politicians, Ted Cruz, everybody. I mean, they all wanted Alice to talk and share what she knew, what she had found out from her research. Until something happened. When the Republican Party began pushing school choice, Alice differed on that. And she differed vehemently, and letting them know what that was going to lead to. They dropped her like a hot potato. And she did not budge an inch. She maintained her stance about how it was going to run private education, homeschool education, and then also bring down public schools as well. And we're seeing that taking place right now in the legislature as they approved it not too long ago. So Alice, I just, from someone who's known you for quite a while, I appreciate so much the stance that you take, the character that you have, and the humbleness that you bring to all of your presentations. So we're just tickled to death to have you here.
All of us get to talk. Almost. Okay, I'm going to introduce Alice Linahan. Alice is a recognized leader in new media and serves as an education policy advisor with Voices in Power, as well as the vice president of Women on the Wall. She is dedicated to connecting the dots between critical issues such as education, immigration, and national security. As the author of Your Child's #1 Threat, 21st Century Learning and the Common Core, Alice has provided a crucial lens on how modern education reforms impact children. She is currently finalizing her upcoming publication, The Age of Novus Capitis, exploring how artificial intelligence is reshaping children's minds into a new form of human capital.
with Novus meaning new and Capitis meaning capital. Alice has worked relentlessly to expose the risks of college and career readiness initiatives and Common Core aligned global standards, educating the public on their implications and encouraging active involvement in addressing these challenges. A sought-after speaker, Alice travels nationwide to engage parents and taxpayers, uncovering the truth behind education policies and addressing the unilateral mental disarmament of America's future voters. Let's welcome.
Take that off because I don't know if I can say. Thank you all very much. You know, one of the things that I love the most about coming to speak with groups like yours is you start with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. And to me, that gives me hope. That gives me hope. You know, I am not anyone special. That reads kind of like I'm special, and I've done a lot, but I'm just a mom. I have 3 children, and I saw what was happening in our children's schools. And I was politically active, like Pat said. I held Ted Cruz's last event before he became senator, hosted that event. I had access. In Paxton, all of them, I had access. And when I started looking at legislation that they were writing or that they were supporting as one of their, activists, getting them elected, I was saying, what are the talking points? Give me some information, because I'm looking at this and this isn't very good. I need to know why. And like Pat said, I became the enemy. And they had to try to silence me. But, those of us that have been in this a long time know that there's a lot of people that were fighting this battle in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, outcome-based education. How many people in the room have heard of outcome-based education? Yes, that's what this is. They'll say it's 21st century learning, but there's nothing new about it. This fundamental transformation occurring, they'll say it's 21st century learning. It's not. The difference between then and now that's significant, and I was talking to someone earlier, is teachers were not evaluated. In the past, students were given a test. Did they learn 2 + 2 is 4? Now teachers are being evaluated. School districts are being evaluated. And as many of you know, Dr. Hunt has written about it in his book, in the accountability system. That's what's different between the outcome-based education then and the outcome-based education now, and also the technology. That's the big thing. And I'm going to ask you if you'll hand this out. This is kind of the key things that I want to talk about tonight, and kind of go through a history of this system. The shift has changed from a transmission of knowledge that parents still expect in the classroom and from our schools, to an emphasis on altering the students' worldviews, their values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. We send our children and our grandchildren to school thinking they're going to gain knowledge. But there has been a shift in education away from academics to values, beliefs, and behaviors. Then it's just a matter of whose values, beliefs, and behaviors. And let me make this clear. Even if I agree with the values, beliefs, and behaviors, it's not okay for someone else to come into my children's brain and think that they have the right to alter their worldview or their values, beliefs, and behaviors. That is a fundamental right that our children have as free individuals. You know, in the past, we had an education system in the United States, kindergarten through 12th grade. You graduated in 12th grade and you were free. You were free to go to college. You were free to go down a vocational path. You were free to do that and make that individual decision because you were taught to read well, write well, do math, and know history. Now our children have to decide what they want to be at the end of 8th grade. And we're just going to educate you down this education path. That is limiting our children. It is limiting our children. And how many of you have heard of college and career readiness standards? Do you know what those really are? How many of you have heard of the Common Core? The Common Core is the same thing as college and career readiness standards. There has been a system locked in place. How many of you have heard of the P20W? Aaron? Yeah. P20W stands for preschool through the workforce. And that system has been put in place through federal and state laws over many years. Back in 1965, they put in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That was federal dollars coming back to the state to teach economically disadvantaged children how to read. That was in 65. Economically disadvantaged children cannot read today, and now economically advantaged children can't read today. So we have a problem. That federal law was reauthorized or exchanged and called No Child Left Behind. How many of you have heard of No Child Left Behind? Yes. George W. Bush. What No Child Left Behind did is mandated testing. We can't leave children behind, so we're going to mandate testing from the federal government, not state, from the federal government. If we're going to test them, we got to start collecting data on them. So with the No Child Left Behind, they set up statewide longitudinal database systems. At that time, it was illegal to have a national database system, so they did 50 separate database systems. And then under the stimulus package, all 50 states got stimulus money to upgrade the database systems. All those database systems are now interoperable. Under Obama, he changed the regulation on the FERPA law, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, to say that our children's private data and their teachers' private data can be collected without consent in the name of research. That's what opened up Pandora's box, because then you had people like Bill Gates giving TASA, Texas Association of School Administrators, $6 million to bring in online digital learning. He gave the TEA, Texas Education Agency, another $6 million to bring in online digital learning. So that's what opened up Pandora's box. Also, at the state level, they passed a law, I think it was 2011, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but basically that permanent education fund that used to be used just for for textbooks, and we had the big textbook battles here in the state of Texas. And, you know, whatever Texas did, that's the way the nation went because we bought so many textbooks. At the state level, lobbied by Microsoft lobbyists, who went after me at the time, they changed the law to where that permanent education fund could now be used for online digital learning and professional development. At the federal law level, under Obama, they passed WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And what that federal law does is it binds education under the Department of Education, Department of Labor, Department of Health and Human Services, and Department of Defense. So we can get rid of the Department of Education tomorrow, as Trump says he's doing, but it's all smoke and mirrors because there's federal dollars coming back to the state through those other departments that are controlling our state. When we take 1 penny of federal dollars for education, we must align. And what must we align to? Well, under Obama, they reauthorized No Child Left Behind and called it the Every Student Succeeds Act. And let me make this clear. Remember, we're in the P20W system, preschool through the workforce. And when they say every student, they mean every student. And we are now lifelong learners. So if you want to know why all of these companies are bringing in what's mandated in the Every Student Succeeds Act, it's college and career readiness Common Core aligned standards. Those standards are not academic. Those standards are behavioral. In the state of Texas, are under Republican, and it breaks my heart that it's under a Republican because that's who I helped get elected, but they passed Senate Bill 123. Senate Bill 123 mandates that our school districts implement social and emotional learning. See, this is what this is. This is set in place like a set of gears to control, and data is the king. I've already kind of gone through the Common Core, but where did the Common Core standards come from? Well, the United Nations, UNESCO. 2015, under, actually it was Betsy DeVos, Republican, supposedly. In 2015, the United States signed the Global Goals Agreement known as the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, read this. The choice readiness will use education and data for our students to be in one of 3 tracks. We were talking about this earlier. College, a leader or authority. A citizen includes military and a protector or a worker. College and career readiness standards. This is what this is. Key players in this global transformation: Google, Microsoft, the OECD. How many in this room have ever heard of the OECD? The Organization for Economic Cooperation Development, the World Policy Organization. I'll read this, but I think this is so important. The OECD runs an assessment system to support UNESCO's sustainable goals. Their assessment director, Andre Schleicher, and I may have said that wrong, a German, worked with the Obama administration to reshape the U.S. K-12 online assessment system. The OECD reshaped assessments so that they run in the background of online learning. In Texas, we've already put in place the next generation of assessments and accountability. Interestingly, Mike Morath, our current Commissioner of Education, who's been in place since 2016, we did a FOIA request for his application to be the Commissioner of Education. There was no application on file except for him to sit on the commission of the next generation of assessments and accountability. And you know who the #1 reference was on that application? Todd Williams. You know who Todd Williams is? He's a former Goldman Sachs guy. He was a Democrat that supported Obama. He runs Commit in the state of Texas, and Commit holds the largest amount of student data. Abbott appointed Morath. Abbott has put Todd Williams all over in commissions over the Permanent Education Fund. And if you want to know who's writing these bills like HB2 that just passed, Todd Williams. And if you look at all this legislation, it gives more and more and more and more and more and more power to the unelected, appointed Commissioner of Education, Mike Morath. Mike Morath has no experience in education. Mike Morath, when he came into place, remember when Obama put in his czars? Mike Morath did the same thing at the TEA, the Texas Education Agency. Interestingly enough, his czar, deputy of governance, who would come into school districts and take over the school district and bring in appointed school board members, was a guy named A.J. Crable. A.J. Crable was a community organizer for Obama in Kansas City. A.J. Crable's highest attainment of education was a high school diploma. And when we went to the committee on his appointment and gave him all this stuff about Mike Morath, they did not listen. And on both sides of the aisle, they think Mike Morath hung the moon. Why? Data, 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 data is the new black gold in the state of Texas. One more thing I think this is important. The OECD quotes, the skills, attitudes, and values that shape human behavior should be rethought to counter the discriminatory behaviors picked up at school and in the family. This is in their documents. And if you go on my website, Voices in Power, I've got all of the documents. And let me just say, I encourage someone to please go and do the research and prove me wrong. Because if I am wrong, I will humbly submit and say I'm wrong publicly and go about being a mom. I've been at this for over a decade, and not one person has been able to come in and prove me wrong. I really wish I was wrong. I talked about college and career ready. I talked about already Mike Morath. And it's really interesting about Mike Morath. And I want, as we go out today, and you take the information that you learn today, and you're talking to people and they tell you you're crazy, like they told me for over a decade. But I want to tell you a story, and Marianne kind of mentioned the green, yellow, and red people. But I think this is really important when we go out and we're trying to educate people on what's going on. I have a really good friend of mine Brandon Darby. He was on the far left. He was far left. He was hanging out with the really far leftists. And he actually became the FBI informant that stopped the bombing of the Republican National Convention. And he talks about how they organized in the green, yellow, and red people. The green people were hardworking Democrats that disagreed with the Republicans, and they were just going to bus them there to hold up protest signs. They weren't doing anything bad or illegal. Then you had the yellow people, a little more radical, a little more in the know, and they were bused there to hold up PVC pipe to hold back the police. The green people didn't know about the yellow people. Then you had the red people. They're the ones that would throw the Molotov cocktails or throw the bombs. What does that have to do with education? I was meeting with Dr. Stillman, our education director at our Education Service Center in Fort Worth, and he was trying to tell me how wonderful C-SCOPE was. This was back in the day, and it was the latest and greatest 21st century learning program. And I said, Dr. Stillman, you and I are just going to have to agree to disagree, because I've done a lot of research and I don't agree with you. But let me tell you a story. And I told him about Brandon Darby and the green, yellow, and red people. And I said, Dr. Stillman, I don't think you're a bad guy. I think you're green. How you put food on your children's table as you go to a conference and you learn the latest and greatest 21st century learning program, and then your job is to come back to my children's school district and rent or sell them a curriculum management system that at best is flawed, at worst is indoctrinating my kids. So I don't think you're bad, I think you're green. So fast forward, and I got a call from Mike Morat, and he was trying to meet with me and tell me how great he was. And I said, I would love the opportunity to meet with you. I would love that opportunity, but I have to be honest. When I'm out talking to groups, and I'm talking about not you as an individual, I'm not attacking you, but the policies and the restructure of the TEA, what you're doing, I describe you as yellow. And then I sent him a video of me talking to a group and explaining what the green, yellow, and red people were. And he wouldn't meet with me. So, you know, when we go out and we're talking to educators, when we're talking to people who are kind of in the system, and they just don't know, when we're talking to legislators, actually, they all know, they all should know now because we've been testifying in front of them for years. But they just don't know what they don't know. And so we have to give people grace that they're on a journey. And with Women on the Wall, the group that I am vice president of, we have a campaign where we asked parents and grandparents and taxpayers to go into the schools, all schools, public, private, charter, even look into the homeschools, and ask 3 questions. Can I see what you're teaching my child? Can I see how you're teaching my child? What is the professional development of the teacher? What are the instructional materials being used? And number 3, can I see who's financially benefiting from the curriculum products on which my child's teacher is evaluated? And if you take that journey, if you're green, and you take that journey from can I see to I can see, you have a choice. Because if you're green and you can see, you're complicit. If you're yellow and you can see, you're complicit. I think the reds are running the show. They're the funders. So I think that as we go out and we take the information that we learn, we have to understand who we're talking to. Because people that said 10 years ago said I was crazy are saying, maybe that lady's not so crazy after all. Texas OER. How many of you have heard of Open Education Resources? How many of you have heard of HB 1605 that was passed in the last legislative session? What 1605 is a state-owned curriculum management system, online digital learning, using open education resource technology. Open. Now, where did that concept, open education resource, where did it come from, you think? UNESCO. UNESCO. It's interesting because when Obama was in office, and you can go on Voices in Power, my website, and put in Obama, and you'll pull up articles where I wrote about it. But he had an initiative to connect all schools. That's what he called it, connect all schools. So a kid in, Klein can be talking to a kid in Cairo. I don't know about you, but I know who my kids are going to spend the night at someone's house. I don't want them online talking to another kid that I don't know. This whole concept of online virtual learning sounds great, doesn't it? Not so much. Not so much. And as a counselor, where our children are with online digital learning. Bettencourt's trying to pass a law this session for funding our tax dollars to do online virtual learning. That's why they need to collapse the traditional public schools. Because what's the difference between a charter school and a traditional public school? A locally elected school board that could say no. That's why I fight for our traditional public schools. Not only do we have some good teachers in our public schools who are there for the right reasons, who are being set up to fail intentionally. And if I'm wrong, someone please prove me wrong. But if you look at the accountability system and you look at the federal and state laws that are coming in and the control over our traditional public schools for them to fail so that they can come in with school choice legislation. Oh, those failing schools. Oh, those woke teachers. Oh, by the way, we mandated social emotional learning, so anyone with an agenda has access to our children. And then they're going to do in the news all the bad things that are happening in our public schools. All the bad things. They don't talk about the algebra carnival this weekend that's coming in Klein. They don't talk about, my child's choir director at Argyle ISD who changed his life. They don't talk about the baseball coach at Argyle ISD who had the most influence on my son, who's now a hitting coach at Texas State. They don't talk about those wonderful teachers and mentors and coaches. I wrote an article several years ago, and I said the way to save America is through Texas high school football. Because if those people actually realize how they're attacking, they would stand up and fight. And it's interesting because I think this next, and I'll put this graphic up right there because we've got our two Brad Buckley and Brandon Creighton. who are pushing all of this. They were instrumental in putting OER and getting HB 1605 passed. They were instrumental this past week in getting school choice. School choice sounds great, doesn't it? Everyone wants a choice. As a mother, I don't get the right to choose my child's education from the state. That is a God-given right that I have been given by God. To say that I need laws passed to regulate my choices means that as a parent, I'm handing my rights over to the state. This legislation, if you actually read the bills, Senate Bill 2, HB 3, it's government regulated choice. And if you look at Senate Bill 3, it's interesting because what do those accredited schools, even home schools, have to provide to the comptroller? Does anyone? Data. But do you know what kind of data? It's actually explicitly written in Senate Bill 2. College, career, and military readiness. So they say, oh, there's no strings. There's no strings. Oh, yes, there are. Data, data, data. They want access. They've got our public school kids. They want access to our private schools kids. They want access to our homeschool kids. That's what government regulated choice is really all about. And I can't tell you how hard we all worked. And we had legislators listening to us who seemed to get it. And what made the difference on Wednesday? Trump. And why, I keep going forward. Why did Trump show up? Why does Trump care about what's going on in education in Texas? I thought it was just a state thing. Well, it's interesting to know how many in this room have heard of Texas Public Policy Foundation. The former head of TPPF is a woman named Brooke Rollins.
Yeah.
Brooke Rollins was in Trump's first administration, and now she's the ag commissioner. Her mother is on the is a elected official now on the Public Education Committee. Brooke Rollins was instrumental in getting Trump to do that Zoom call with all the Republicans. And that's why Trump is out talking about school choice and saying we're going to get rid of the Department of Education. No, you're not. No, you're not. And I'm a huge Trump supporter. I voted for him, and you know, I think some things he's doing are good. This is really bad. And Texas Public Policy Foundation, Empower Texans, these so-called Republican conservative organizations who are out pushing school choice, you have to look at the money, the funders. Can I see who's financially benefiting from the curriculum products on which my child's teacher is evaluated? They want online digital learning. They want access to your kids and my kids and my grandchildren someday. They want access. And some will say, oh, but we're on the right side. We're Christians. Be with us. Be with us. No, you don't get access to my child to do a online curriculum that modifies my child's values, beliefs, and behaviors and strips them of their individual liberty and their rights. No, I don't care if you call yourself a Christian. God, to me, Jesus calls us to propose our faith, not impose our faith. So a lot of these organizations take money from the Tim Dunn's of the world, or the Jeff Yass of the world, and our elected officials get elected with that money. And if you take the money, you take the strings. In school, if you take the money, you take the strings. So we are losing, not only as adults, our freedom and liberty, we're allowing them to strip our children of their freedom and liberty. And this is a quote just from an elected official last week. If I voted against it, I would have every statewide and national political figure against me, not to mention all of my bills vetoed. The consequences were dire with no upside at all. I understand your frustration and I'm disappointed in the outcomes as well. If I would have voted against this, all of my bills and appropriations were at risk. We have some great things we have already done for the district. BS. BS. We did not elect you to go represent us to be bullied by Governor Abbott. Interesting, there's another bill that it's gone through, or it's in committee, and it may have been voted out today. I was driving, so I didn't see, or it may have been tabled. But I think that this is really important to know. Those Republicans that are out talking about, those woke teachers and Planned Parenthood and how bad Ann Richards is, and they're doing a resolution. That's publicity. That's the narrative. At the same time, Republicans are pushing a bill 3672, and when you listen to the testimony, like I did last week on this bill, and you look at who was there championing it and wanting it passed, because they want state dollars for grants for their community programs. If you go on their website, and what are their community programs pushing? One student, one project, one community at a time. Creative action will be a force for equity. Equity. Not equal outcomes, or equity is equal outcomes, not equal opportunity. And that's the difference. Students of all ages will explore creativity, process their emotions, and reflect on issues related to social justice. This is what your Republicans want your tax dollars to go to. I don't know if Ashby, who's championing this, is green or yellow. I don't know. Interesting, I don't think these elected officials really know what the intention is of these bills. They think the YMCA or the Boys Club, or Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. I guarantee you they have not read the impact report from these organizations. I'll read the last one. Creative action will stand up against all injustice, oppression, and hate. We actively work towards equity and justice. That's DEI, folks. I thought the Republicans were against DEI. They say they are, but they're not. I'll get your question in just a second. I'm almost done. This is another important issue. How how many have heard the report coming out? It was just today or yesterday about Abbott getting paid by Colony Ridge. Yeah. School choice. Does everybody know what Colony? It's basically a haven for illegal immigrants. It's a development.
Just right by us, yes.
Yeah, right by you. It's interesting because under Dan Patrick, you know, when he was pushing all the charter schools, school choice charter schools, do you know that in Texas, we have the largest amount of Harmony or Royal Public Schools, charter schools? They're billed as math and science centers. Do you know who they're attached to? Fatwa Gulen, an imam out of Turkey. He's actually just passed away. Yeah, not just Islamic. Islamic. There's a big, and I think that we have to be very careful. Not all Muslims are Islamic extremists. And so, but I listened personally to the superintendent when they were trying to get the Royal Public Schools, and you have to understand these charter schools, they just get one. And then they're registered. Interesting, in Senate Bill 2, everybody said, oh, well, there's they have to be registered in the state of Texas to get ESA money. Yeah, you can be a foreign entity and be registered in Texas. You can have people living in Texas who are registered, and then through it's called replication, they just start building all these schools. Well, Senator Turam, who was testifying, was talking about how they use social emotional learning to train the whole child. Train the whole child. What? In Islamic fundamentalism? This is a national security threat. It's called civilization jihad. They come into a community, they just, you know, like what's happening in Garland, the Epic Centers. And Dan Patrick was very instrumental in taking money for those royal charter schools. So what we have to understand is we're allowing our tax dollars not only to collect data on our children, not only to modify our children's values, beliefs, and behaviors, but we're opening up the door for foreign entities to have access to our tax dollars and to our children to modify their values, beliefs, and behaviors. This is a problem, and if we don't, as Republicans, stop saying, oh, it's just the Democrats, those crazy woke Democrats. I'll tell you what, in the Education Committee, the only two people who made any sense and who sounded like conservatives were Tallarico and Gina Hinojosa.
That's right.
And Gina Hinojosa is a mom. Both Democrats. Gina Hinojosa actually put forth a bill to do just a sunset audit of the TEA. You think she's going to get that? Oh, but Andy Hopper said, oh, well, I put forth a bill to get rid of the TEA. Well, that's BS. That's just a statement bill. Gina Hinojosa actually had a bill that would do something. So we need to, as conservatives, as Republicans, I don't know if everybody is in this room, but, you know, right now, it's like a lot of old school Democrats say the Democrat Party left them. Well, the Republican Party has left me. I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party has left us. And we have got to get ready for the primary. We have got to get ready. It's interesting, there's a bunch of coaches retired coaches who are looking at running for office in some of these rural communities. So we need to start looking at who in our ranks, who in our community is willing to step up. And then we've got to flip the funnel, if you will, the big money, the Jeff Yazzie money and all that war chest that Abbott used to get rid of people who wouldn't align to school choice. We've got to organize, and we don't need a lot of money. We just need people on the ground, someone to step up, and people on the ground. I'm not going to sit here and read all of this. I'm going to encourage you to go to my website, voicesempower.com, and go to my Substack. And on that sheet that I gave you, it's got the information there. If you don't think this has not been in the works for a long time, Google Mark Tucker in 1988. It's interesting because when Hillary was putting together Hillary Care that became Obamacare, she was working with Mark Tucker. And Mark Tucker gave her the infamous Tucker letter and basically laid out the blueprint. And if you think of Obamacare and an individual mandate for health care, it's the same exact blueprint in education with the Common Core. It is an individual mandate that every student in the workforce, pre-K through the workforce, comes under the College and Career Readiness Common Core standard. It's the same exact blueprint. Well, where did Mark Tucker get that? Well, interestingly, and if you go on my website and Google it, there's a letter. I know Pat knows about this, the Turchenko letter from, it was in a book, I found it, from Robin Eubanks, wrote a book, Credentialed to Destroy, How and When Education Became a Weapon. And in that book, she talks about the Turchenko letter. Turchenko was Soviet, from the Soviet Union, and basically he wrote a letter, the scientific technological takeover of America. And that blueprint in the Turchenko letter from the 1970s is the same exact blueprint that Mark Tucker used and gave to Hillary Clinton. And then, yeah, lock her up, that's right. In that letter, Turchenko says, this will be implemented and people will not even realize it until it's too late. Well, I hope that tonight you realize it. And I don't think it's too late. Because I think that we have a foundation to stand on. America is great. We did have one of the greatest education systems in the world in the past. Pencil, paper, a big cheap notepad. We have that. And I think that it's gone too far. And people are starting to wake up. And like I said, people before said I was crazy, and now they're saying maybe she's not so crazy. So if you, and I encourage you to do your research. And, my friends and neighbors, your friends and neighbors don't know and love me, they know and love you. And so if you become the knowledgeable person, if you become the Marianne Jackson or the Pat or Aaron or me or Susan or, you become the one that's done the research so that when people start waking up, they know who to call. And that's what That's how we win. And the blessing is, in the end, God wins. God wins. So, thank you all. Take any questions. I know, did you have a question?
I just wanted to make a comment. You had voted for the Humboldt ISD bond, and the first part said equity for all children.
Yeah.
Turned me off right there. I was
Right.
like,
That's what this is. It's a shift away from academics and to equity, equal outcomes, which eliminates equal opportunity. That's what this is. Marion.
Can you just in a few words kind of describe what Common Core is? Because it's kind of a harder one to grasp than critical race theory and some of these other things.
Well, Common Core, they're standards, and they're mandated from the federal government, and they're data standards. And interestingly, in Texas, you know, we're Texas, we passed a law that said no Common Core. Both. Because we were part of the initial implementation of the college and career readiness standards. And it's interesting, our TEKS, our Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, are aligned to the Common Core federal standards. We had Dr. Jim Milgram. Math is the perfect example. Dr. Jim Milgram, a mathematician from Stanford, was appointed to validate the Common Core math standards at the federal level. And he refused. And he said children who are in this type of math for more than 4 years will likely never recover. He came down and testified for us in front of the State Board of Education when they were redoing our math standards. And he looked at our math standards and he said they were actually worse than the Common Core. And my own son, or my youngest son, he was in 4th grade, went from loving school to coming home crying every day. And it was because of math. And his math teacher was the same math teacher that my older son had, and she's a wonderful, wonderful math teacher. She was being forced to use the Common Core math standard, college and career readiness, because our TEKS had shifted. It wasn't her fault. But my son was being impacted. I knew what was going on because of all this crazy stuff I do, but I knew what it was. So I pulled my son out. Think of how many kids were left in. That's the problem. The Common Core standards it's basically a dumbing down of our education system. It's by design. That's why actually globally, math has plummeted. Actually in Sweden, I was listening to a podcast of a legislator or an elected official in Sweden, and they were talking about how they are shifting back to pen, paper, and textbooks. So we have a foundation. I ended up pulling my son out and homeschooling. Do you know what a perfect homeschool day for him and I were? We would go to thrift stores and buy old books. And today, he lives in Colorado, he's in college, and his fun that he does is go to thrift stores and buys old gaming things, everything old. He loves old, and then he sells it, resells it. Well, entrepreneur. So we do have a foundation, but that's what the Common Core, they are standards, and our Texas TEKS, our Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, have aligned because we took federal dollars. So we had to align. We had to align. So, good question. Yes, sir.
That's kind of a long-winded question maybe, but just something I'm thinking about here. I was listening to a podcast, the fellow was talking about the fact that our college education system in a lot of ways was developed by the Vanderbilt and Carnegie families way back when because they needed workers to control their factories, right? So they looked around, they said, we need engineers, we need this, we need this, we need this, so we create these tracks for these kids to go on. And while the average American is out chasing the American dream, there's nefarious actors out there that are changing the whole landscape of the system. And I'm just wondering how many times you wanted to kill somebody when you found out really how much money is driving what's going on. And it's not really the politicians are intentionally yellow and red. They think they're green, doing the right things.
Right.
But the real green they're getting is the kickbacks and other things from these big monies. So the question is, okay, so we know this system is out there. How do we, as quote unquote little people that don't have access to that influence, how do we make that shift when you know you get all these freshmen congressmen or senators going to Washington and they're going to make a difference, and they run into the career politicians, the Pelosi's, the Schumers, that have been there forever, and they got nothing because of all the money that's being goes against them. So I don't know if that question makes sense.
Well,
to you.
yeah, and it goes back to that, I wish I had it on here. I'll send it to you and you can send it out. It's this graphic of flipping the funnel. You know, you have the funnel where all of this money is just going through and creating these, yes men and women. And flipping it and the grassroots, you and I, at the local level, Bill Ayers, how many in here knows who Bill Ayers? He was, back in the 60s and 70s, he worked with the underground.
Oh, yeah.
And he was organizing the weather underground, and he was organizing into to take over America through violent means. And when he and Bernadine Dorn weren't successful, they went into academia, into the education world. And it was interesting because I have a video of Bill Ayers when Obama was elected, and he's talking about how we can't depend, talking to the leftists, we can't depend on Obama to fix it all for us. We've got to do it ourselves. We've got to do it through city council, mayor, school boards, at the local level. Don't try to reach the people you don't have access to. Reach the people you do have access to. And that's why, and this week we're in early voting for our local municipalities and in some areas school boards. So I think to your question, I really think that what education looks like for our children and grandchildren in 10 years is going to look completely different. And I think the school choice legislation kind of put the nail in the coffin. So what do we do about that? One is we educate ourselves on exactly what's happening so we can see it. And then in our local communities, I tell moms and dads, your number one job is to protect your own child. And then number two is to work with the moms and dads in that community and protect those children. And explain to them, teach them what this is. I told my children, they know I'm this crazy mom, but I do what I do so that they know what's going on so they can navigate this system. And I have to tell this funny story about our daughter. She was in high school in Argyle, ISD. She was the only kid in the whole school district whose mom and dad would not sign off on her using a district-issued Chromebook. Yeah, she loved me. And I went to the school board and I said, what would it look like for my child if I didn't sign off on this? Sign all these forms online. And they said, well, it'll be harder for the teacher. They'll have to use a pen and paper and... Sorry. So she was literally the only kid. She hated me. But she goes to college and she's in a business ethics class. And the professor says, have you ever seen a situation that was, unethical in the business? And she raises her hand and she said, well, my mom was the only one who wouldn't allow me to have a district issued Chromebook because she said every paper I wrote, every keystroke I put, used that computer was my intellectual property and I wasn't being paid for it and someone else was getting access to it and they were making software programs to sell back to my school district and I wasn't being paid for it. So I think, and you'd be surprised, talking to my daughter now, and she just had a birthday, and we had all her friends and cousins that were in that age, late 20s. They get it. They get it. They even get the danger of social media. And that's where I think, to answer your question, I think we don't depend solely on electing someone to save us. We've got to save ourselves. And it's not that we don't work hard to get rid of these guys, because we do need to. And I do think Abbott has really tarnished himself. Really tarnished himself. Aaron?
I don't think we do it ourselves. Trusting God. We do what we can, do our fit work, and then leave the rest up to God. Nowhere in the Bible does say, anything about Republican or Democrat.
Right.
Follow the law. And the Republicans are right of the law, and the Democrats are left of the law. They're not following the law.
Right.
So neither one of them are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And
Right.
watching what I'm watching now with the SB2, it's like they all got their little scripts. And then they're all, it's kind of, okay, I've memorized my lines to you. And it's like, it's disgusting. I mean, it's disgusting. And you know what? They're throwing our kids under the bus. I went to a meeting one time, and this man who used to be on the school board, and he was in city council, and he said that politics is about making deals. And I thought, yeah, you sold our kids down the river. I will never vote for that man again. I don't care if I go in, my whole thing is blank. We cannot, I put my trust in the Lord, I don't put my trust in man, because most of these politicians have been paid off. It's greed. And it's just, it's disgusting.
Well, I think it's greed, and I think it's, I'll tell you, I was in the chamber on Wednesday night. We were in the chamber, and I don't know if you felt this, Mary Ann, but when I went in there, it was evil. Like, I felt, and that evening, going into that evening and watching these men and women on the floor, moving, they're like little ants, making deals. I'll do this, you'll do that, I'll do this. And we're sitting there waiting, are we gonna have the votes to stop it? Are they gonna do the referendum? And I just thought, I felt it. There was an evil presence there. And it was, and what's so disheartening for me is it was coming from people that I thought, and I helped get elected, who were touted as conservative Christians. And the things that they were doing on that floor, and frankly, behind the floor, having cocktails in the, chambers, food and drinks and all of that stuff. When you see how they work on the floor, that's where, to your point, Aaron, we've got to pray. My mantra is pray, take action, pray about that action. Pray, take action, pray about that action. Because there were evil spirits in that
Do you think
room.
it was ramrodded down our throats? That it just was, what I saw is most people did not want this. And I really think, Mary Ann, you went to the Republican convention and I did too. I think you, along with some other people, educated people on what really school choice is. And I think that really woke up a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
So
the
it's
fact that
important to sit there and do what we're doing.
the fact that Abbott had to bring in Trump
Yeah.
means we were having an impact.
Yeah.
They didn't know if they had the votes when they went in. They didn't know. So I think that, we do have the upper hand, and we can't just say, oh, they passed it, I'm so tired, I gotta go home. If I did that 10 years ago, I couldn't. And I'll tell you, on social media, as much as I hate technology for our kids, technology as a tool, and even for our kids, can be a great thing. But as they're out there touting how great they are, it's interesting if you look at the comment section on these elected officials and on Abbott's, so we are not alone in our disgust. There's a lot of people, and I've been saying, if Texas turns blue, it's all at the hands of Abbott. It's all at the hands of Abbott.
Well, and he's blackmailed all those, some primary all.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I think that Gina Hinojosa put out a great video just this week, and she talked about how there's this movement happening, and it's not Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus liberal. It's moms, dads, grandparents, taxpayers in a community. And the people that we go to church with, the people our kids go to school with. People are waking up. Dr. Peg Lexek, she was back in the 80s and 90s, she was out fighting, doing exactly what we've been doing. She was one of our mentors. And someone asked her, why is it all these women who are out here fighting all this? And she said, a man will die for his child. He will stand in the line of fire and die for his child. A mother will kill. And those God-given instincts, that mama bear instinct, you can't pay me off to be quiet. You can't pay off Pat. You can't pay off Mary Ann or any of us. We don't want to belong to a group to make money. We want to belong to a group to save America and save Texas for our children and grandchildren.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Alice, for coming out and just sharing all this great information, and mostly just your perseverance and you hanging in there for so long, and just your encouragement. Tonight we do have a candidate. So we've just bashed all the politicians. We have an inspiring young man who wants to get in this fight, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say and introduce yourself. And we are a Texas PAC, so we cannot endorse federal candidates per se, but we will give you the floor to kind of share with us who you are.
Thank you. Thank you for the education. I need to connect with you to learn more. So I never thought I would be a politician. Never thought I wanted to be a politician. My story started 50 years ago in April 30th. My father and I escaped Vietnam the day Saigon fell. My father was a colonel in the South Vietnamese Army, and we had to get out because he would have been executed. We left with just the clothes on our backs. The airport had already been captured. My mom was on the other side of town that had already been captured, so I never got to see her again. We got out to the coast I found one of the smallest last boats to leave the country. It was a boat made for 18 people, and over 100 something people jumped on board. We didn't have a plan, so we just went out to sea and on a prayer. 3 days later, we ran out of food and water and fuel, and we were stranded out in the Pacific. On the third day, they say you can survive in 21 days without food. 3 days without water, you die. So some people on that boat started to die on that third day. We had sent out SOS messages throughout the time, and we never knew if anybody heard that SOS message. Luckily, we were rescued by an American destroyer from the 7th Fleet on the third day that morning. America saved us, and they took us to Guam, where we lived at a refugee camp until we were granted political asylum to come to the United States. We came here legally. And as I grew up in the United States here in Houston, and I learned about history, I learned about the sacrifices that our Vietnam vets made for our country to fight for us, and how they came home and were spit on and called baby killers. I felt this deep, deep need to repay back those veterans and also this country who opened up our arms for me and my family in the darkest hour. So as soon as I was old enough, I did the only thing that I felt was right. I joined the Army to serve this country, to pay her back. I fought in Desert Storm, the Persian Gulf War, the first war. I fought there and finished my 3 years. I enlisted, got out on Army discharge, went to college to use my GI Bill to pay for my own way through college. Started a career in corporate sector, did well. I made about 6 figures, and then 9/11 happened. When I saw those planes hit the towers, I had to do something again. I still felt that need, so I re-enlisted. I left my high-paying job in corporate America. I enlisted and went to Afghanistan, and I fought in Afghanistan. After that war, I still felt I still needed to do more, so I went to Iraq and fought there. After 13 years, I got out of military service, and I started working in the oil and gas sector. Worked for Schlumberger for 10 years. I led a program, I built a program to help veterans. It was my own way of healing some of the demons that I had to deal with from all those wars and my escape here. I helped veterans find jobs, I helped veterans get off the streets, I helped them heal from PTSD. I helped recognize Vietnam War veterans, Korean War veterans, and World War II veterans. I left oil and gas last year. My wife and I started a small business. And again, I never thought I would run for office, but what I saw that happen to our country by the deep state in the last 4 years sickened me, made me angry. I fought for 3 different wars in this country abroad, and America saved our lives on May 2nd, 50 years ago. That was the date that we were rescued. And on May 2nd, in a few weeks, I'm going to announce my formal run for Congress against Dan Crenshaw to fight for American unity. You know, it's the deep state that destroyed this country, or tried to. And it's the establishment and the Republicans that are part of that establishment that helped betray us and work with the deep state to make that happen. And that's what I'm going to run and fight against. For me, it's about making this country safer, stronger, and wealthier. And we do that by fighting those who betrayed us. You know, I swore an oath to defend this nation from enemies foreign and domestic. I understood the foreign part. I didn't understand what the domestic part until recently. And that's what I'm going to fight for. I'm not a career politician. I'm new at politics, but I'm not new at service. And I'm not new in running a business. So I know most of you are not in my district, so I can't get your vote, but I can use your help.
Thank you.
My website is easy to remember. It's nicktranfortexas.com. All my vision, my stance, what I stand for, and what my pledge is there in black and white for the world to see. My Facebook page is Nick Tran for Congress. Pretty easy. Connect with me on that. Share it with your friends. And I can use help fundraising, because without funds, I have no fight in this. More importantly, one of the things that I committed to is I believe in term limits. So I'm only going to run for two terms. The reason for that is congressmen get a pension after 5 years, and 2 terms only gives me 4 years. So I don't want to burden taxpayer dollars for me serving. I've already gotten a pension for my military service. And the other thing is I'm going to donate 1/3 of my salary for veteran causes. For me, it's not about money. It's not about power. I don't believe that getting to the seat is so I can have power. It's for me to get in the seat so I can serve. For me, it's about service. God bless America.
Well, thank you, John Payne, for introducing to us Nick Tran. How exciting. And Nick, we can go all across any boundary lines and come blah and donate. So yes, we're here. And it was very good to hear your story. Thank you for sharing.
I have a team of 1 right now.
All right.
And all help at the end.
All right. Where was I? Oh, that was a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing it. A very refreshing story, a very uplifting story. And thank you so much for stepping up and being in the fight. I did want to recognize, before we close, Megan Jasper. Megan, I know you tried to get our student constitution book into the Tomball schools, and we're sorry that they got rejected. But we did donate. Mariah Socks is a homeschool leader, and she said that the homeschoolers would be glad to take those constitution books that Tomball rejected. I know, isn't that sad? Let's see, what else? And we were able to give, one of the social studies teachers in Tomball did tell me, give me one of those books. I'm going to put them in my room anyway. So he took the book. So our next event, our meeting, will either be in June or July. We're working to try to get someone to come and explain some of this legislation. Alice did a great job talking about some of the history of education and some of the current various legislation that has gotten us to where we are now. But so we will be announcing who our speaker will be, and we also have a drawing. We have a couple door prizes. So, you ready? Okay, this is Monica Dean. Monica took, she's our membership chair, our VP, and she, so we have, we have a couple things that we got donated. We do have a book from Dr. Pat Huff that kind of explains some of the things happening in, or happened in education, and kind of got us to where we are now. We have this In God We Trust, and we have a beautiful photo of the Washington Monument, right? Yeah. In Washington, D.C. So, and we do have a gift card. It's over in mine. All right, so we're going to pick out, and I think we just need to read the last 3 numbers. Okay. So I'm going to just read the last 3 numbers. So you can, just going to give you my whole purse.
All right. All right. The first one is 730. 730. Mary.
Did she get her pick?
Yes.
She gets her pick. You can pick your pick. $25 gift card to Valley Ranch, and then those photos and a book. All right, that one's gone. All right, the next one is 016. 016. Teresa, come on down. All right, so you can choose over there.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. This is
The picture of the Washington Monument, In God We Trust, in the book. All right, the next one is 996. 996, anyone? Come on down. All right, we have one more. Okay, the last one. Who will be the lucky one? It is 008. 008. Okay, well, I'll pick one more. 993. Who was it? 993? All right, that's it.
Thank y'all very much for coming, and hope you have a nice, safe evening.
This off.
See you again, Robert.